Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Alfred Hitchcock.
I'm Ryan Woolley. That just does not seem to have the same ringtone. Psycho, released in 1960, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, and stars Janet Leigh and Anthony Perkins. For those of you that don't know Janet Leigh, she was the mother of Jamie Lee Curtis, so I think it might be safe to say they're the best mother-daughter duo in horror movie history. This movie was iconic and was a huge inspiration for horror movies like the original Halloween. Psycho is a movie that is arguably the most suspenseful film of all time, and even though I've seen this movie numerous times, the trailer for this movie gives me the chills every time.
Here we have a quiet little motel.
This film has a legacy that will last forever, much like the movie Jaws, in the sense that when you are in a large body of water, you think about, is there a shark in the water?
There are sharks in there!
Hey, that's my family you're talking about.
And the chorus music that goes along with that. Psycho has that exact same effect. Everybody knows about the infamous shower stabbing scene, even if they can't name the movie. When you are in a shower and have your eyes closed, we all have had that rush, even if the door is locked. Is there someone that's in here with me now and is about to stab me? Horror movies are my favorite genre of film, and this is certainly a picture that laid the foundation of what makes a great horror film. Suspense, jump scares, compelling characters, creepy location, and a great plot. This is a film that is captivating and keeps you engaged throughout. Certainly have to give credit to these two gentlemen on how great this picture turned out. Bernard Herrmann, who created the soundtrack for the film. The scenes that use music in the background really heighten your anticipation, adrenaline, and anxiety masterfully. And Joseph Stefano, who was the writer for the film. This film is inspired and loosely based off the book. I have the Blu-ray for Psycho, and in the special features they mention the changes that were made when producing the movie and the alterations that they did for it, which makes this a better version of the story, quite frankly. In case you have not seen Psycho and want to watch it before the review, here is your 5-second spoiler warning. Film starts off in Phoenix, Arizona, in this hotel. This woman, Marion, is with her lover, Sam, and it's a very much lust-filled relationship. And the crossroad they are in is taking their relationship to the next level. Marion feels she's in limbo and doesn't like continuing these secretive type of get-togethers, where they're just going to hook up, basically. She feels like a friend with benefits. And she wants to get her life on track and get married. And Sam, the lover, is frustrated with his financial situation. He owes his ex-wife alimony, which is money ordered to be given by court following a divorce, and also the debt that his father got him in. So his old man really fucked him.
Hey, I fucked your dad.
Marion has never been married, and Sam mentions if his ex-wife remarries, the alimony would be over. Sam tells Marion she would be a great wife, and this rush of energy comes over her, and they wind up smooching, and she says, let's get married. Sam jokes about how he does not have a lot to offer from a financial basis, and their life would be very much a humble one. He tells Marion we could cut this off, and you could find someone more available, and think this is a serious moment, but they both laugh it off, which tells you that they are obviously in love and care very much deeply about one another. So that's something they're not seriously considering. They are very much... they're in the thick of it together. Marion has to return to work where she is a secretary for a real estate office. This guy in the top hat, Mr. Cassidy, comes in, who is very wealthy from oil leasing. He's arrived into the real estate office to purchase a home for his daughter, who is getting married. And you can kind of tell this conversation is making Marion a little uncomfortable given her current situation with Sam, and the lack of her being a wife. Mr. Cassidy says to Marion that his daughter has not had an unhappy day in her 18 years of living. How about we ask your daughter that? I mean, just because you're rich, sir, doesn't mean you're father of the year. But you are buying her a house, which is pretty nice of you, I will say. The other woman that's in the office with Marion she's not an important character, but that's Alfred Hitchcock's daughter. He mentions when he has unhappiness, he buys it off. Oh, I wish we were all so lucky to be able to have that as a go-to. Just buy away my problems. Yeah, not too many people can identify with that. This is a quote that definitely plays into a decision that Marion will make shortly, though.
Now, that's not buying happiness. That's just buying off unhappiness.
Cassidy is buying this house $40,000 in cash. Mr. Lowry, who is Marion's boss, tells her to not leave that amount of money in the office. He's definitely worried and stressed about keeping it there and says to go deposit it in the bank. Marion asks Lowry if she can go right home after depositing the money because she says she has a headache, and Lowry doesn't even say yes or no. Cassidy chimes in and says that him and Lowry are going out drinking and tells her it's okay. I guess when you buy a house in cash, you can tell someone's employees what to do for at least that day. Marion's home and looks over longingly at the money in an envelope on her bed, so now you know she didn't take it to the bank. I love this moment in the movie where the camera just zooms in on the money, as if Hitchcock is almost trying to tease and entice you from the stack of $100 bills. For that kind of bag right there, a lot of people would be doing some raunchy things, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Then the camera pans over to a suitcase filled with clothes. This is the proverbial take the bag and run scenario, but in this case, it's take the envelope and run. This scene is really powerful in the sense that you can see Marion is having an internal conflict with what she's potentially about to do with taking the money, and the music in the background for this illustrates that perfectly. Now, Marion is on the road, and she sees her boss at a crosswalk, and they link eyes, and he has this bewildered look on his face, and walks away. And she then speeds off, and music starts to pick up and go faster, and it's really effective at getting your adrenaline and heart racing. Marion is driving at night, and you see all these cars with their lights on, and her eyes start to get heavy and close. We then see her the next morning pulled over on the side of the road, and a cop pulls up. She pulled over to sleep, and when he knocks on the window, she freaks out and starts the car, and he starts questioning her on, "You look like you're in a hurry." He asks if she slept here all night, and Marion is the worst criminal on the run because she is talking a mile a minute and is completely stone-faced. A cop is already coming into the situation suspicious and looking for something to be wrong, and she's just giving him every reason to think that something is up. He asks her if anything is wrong, and she gives the worst answer.
Is anything wrong?
Of course not. Am I acting as if there's something wrong?
Frankly, yes.
Hey, Peter.
Hey, what's going on?
Is something wrong?
No. Everything's cool right now. Might be some problems later, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Please, I'd like to go.
Well, is there?
Is there what? I've told you there's nothing wrong, except that I'm in a hurry and you're taking up my time.
They go back and forth, and it's just going awful for her. He then checks out her license plate and gets in his car, and she pulls away. He follows her, and you could feel the tension and uneasiness she's feeling. The officer winds up taking a different intersection, and you can see the relief on her face. Marion pulls up to a used car shop and wants to trade her car in because, after all, she's now a criminal on the run, and she grabs a nearby newspaper. I guess she's trying to see, did she make the headlines? And Mr. Officer shows up right as she's flipping through, and he gets out of his car to view her firsthand. And as Marion is talking to the salesman, she sees the cop across the road, so now her nerves are frying at this point. And the salesman asks, "Are you in a hurry? Is somebody chasing you?" And he's justified for asking, because she doesn't even want to drive the car that she's about to get. A normal person or non-criminal would surely want to do so. And his response for it is sarcastic and fitting. First time anyone pressured a salesman. And he says it'll be her car plus $700. And she agrees. And he looks pretty shocked by that response. Probably first time somebody didn't try to bargain, and let's be honest, in 1960, not too many women probably were paying $700 to purchase anything. The dealer wants to know something.
I take it you can prove that car is yours. I mean, out-of-state license and all. You got your pink slip and
I believe I have the necessary papers.
Marion asks, is there a restroom? And she goes in and breaks out the cash and walks out to the dealer. They head to the back of the shop to make the transaction, and the cop pulls up to the front. And Marion is ever so eager to hop in her new whip, and she takes right on off. And she almost forgets her belongings and pulls away. And everyone behind her definitely has their thoughts of suspicion. Marion is now driving along, and we hear the voice of the salesman from the rent-a-car and the cop. It's Marion playing in her head what they might be saying about her after she left. And it's great, this moment, because I think it heightens the tension even more, and you could feel her anxiety about the whole ordeal now building, between the music and her facial expressions.
heck, officer, that was the first time I ever saw the customer high pressure the salesman. Somebody chasing her?
I better have a look at those papers, Charlie.
She looked like a wrong one to you?
Acted like one.
The only funny thing, she paid me $700 in cash.
She then starts thinking about what Mr. Lowry and her coworker would be saying, and also Mr. Lowry being on the phone with her sister.
Sorry?
Carolyn? Marion still isn't in?
No, Mr. Lowry, but then she's always a bit late on Monday mornings.
Buzz me the minute she comes in.
No, I haven't the faintest idea. As I said, I last saw your sister when she left this office on Friday. She said she didn't feel well and wanted to leave early. I said she could.
Lowry talking to Cassidy, and the expression you can see in Janet Leigh's face, I think, is genius with this part, where she's imagining what Mr. Cassidy would be saying about her, that he would be saying negative things, and quite frankly, sinister type shit about her. And her facial expression changes to one of smirking and something of a fuck you face.
Girl works for you for 10 years, you trust her. All right, yes, you better come over.
Well, I ain't about to kiss off $40,000. I'll get it back, and if any of it's missing, I'll replace it with her fine, soft flesh. You still trust him? Hot creeper. She sat there while I dumped it out. Hardly even looked at it. Planning and even flirting with me.
She's internally trying to justify what she's doing in taking the money and fleeing. The rain starts to really pick up and get intense, and Marion sees a motel, the Bates Motel, and decides to pull up and call it a night. She walks into the office and nobody is there, and she sees a house nearby with lights on, and sees a woman walk by in the window. Marion honks the horn, and down comes this man, Norman Bates, who says he couldn't hear Marion in all the rain and tells her there's 12 cabins and 12 vacancies, so this is a motel right now that has nobody else in it. And the reason he says is because of a nearby highway that has been built. Marion signs in to stay under a false last name, Samuels. Norman takes Marion's bags to her room and tells her about her room, and he has a little trouble telling her about a specific location.
And over there.
The bathroom.
Yeah.
Marion thanks him by calling him Mr. Bates, and he says, "Call me Norman Bates." Norman mentioned to Marion when she was checking in that there was a diner about 10 miles from the hotel. He asked her, he's I think wishfully hoping that she was going to say that. Norman suggests that, why don't you have dinner with me then? And he says he'd very much like for her to come up to the house. And Marion says that she would like to. Norman is well-dressed and well-spoken, and he definitely looks harmless, so she figures, sure, why not? Even though he's a little awkward, he seems harmless. I believe Marion feels like she's doing him a favor here, because she kind of feels sorry for him in a way. He tells her he'll be back as soon as it's ready. Marion starts to unpack, and she's now trying to figure out where is the best place to hide this large sum of money that she has. And she winds up folding it several times over a newspaper. And right as she's placing it on the mantel, you hear Norman Bates' mother and him going back and forth. And it's rather intense.
No, I tell you, no. I won't have you bringing strange young girls in for supper. By candlelight, I suppose, in the cheap erotic fashion of young men with cheap erotic minds.
Mother, please.
Norman comes down from the house, and Marion greets him outside the door, and she tells him, "I've caused you some trouble." And Norman explains that she's not quite herself today. And Marion says that Norman shouldn't have bothered because she doesn't have an appetite. "So you lied, motherfucker. You could have told him I'm not hungry, you And you can tell Norman is embarrassed by the whole situation. After just telling him that she doesn't have an appetite, she says that. Marion, you shouldn't have told him that if you were just going to say that in the first place. Marion steps by the door as if to say, okay, take the food in. And Norman has other ideas.
It might be nicer and warmer in the office.
All right.
Oh my god, this guy is a bird stuffer. Norman tells her,
It's all for you. I'm not hungry, go ahead.
Remember he just said this?
Well then, would you do me a favor? Would you have dinner with me? I was just about to myself. You know, nothing special, just sandwiches and milk, but...
And he goes on telling her about birds and his enjoyment of stuffing them, and, I'm not wanting to stay alone with that person. And talks about what he doesn't like to stuff. And Marion tells him how a man should have a hobby. I think a man should have a hobby, but I think women should have hobbies too. Okay, so it's a little bizarre, but I mean, there is a market for it.
Do you go out with friends?
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
I mean, he might be a hardcore mama's boy, but she didn't ask you about your best friend. She asked you, do you go out with your friends? So obviously you know this is a guy that is not a social butterfly, or a man of the people by any means with that answer. Norman tells Marion, you've never had an empty moment in your entire life, have you? Well, Norman, I think compared to you, everybody is wild, outgoing, and adventurous. A bachelor or a bachelorette. And he wants to know where she's going, and the look on Marion's face, I think, says it all, that she's not comfortable with that question. And she says, looking for a private island. I'm not sure if this was supposed to be sarcastic or not, but Norman picks up on something and asks her, what are you running away from? Which is pretty frightening and remarkable that he has an idea of her dilemma. And again, you can tell this fear and nervousness comes over her. And Marion showed prior with the car salesman and the cop she doesn't do well being under pressure. And she asks him rightfully, why do you ask that? And Norman tells her people never run away from anything. And Norman goes on to tell Marion this.
I think that we're all in our private traps.
It's a trap!
Clamped in them, and none of us can ever get out. We never budge an inch.
Sometimes we deliberately step into those traps.
I was born in mine. I don't mind it anymore.
And Marion tells Norman sometime we deliberately step into those traps. She is certainly a prime example of that one. Norman replies by saying that he was born into his trap and that he doesn't mind it anymore. But Marion says you should mind that you are. And he says,
you should mind it.
Oh, I do. But I say I don't.
if you're miserable about a situation, trying to convince yourself you're not, it could be argued that it's better than sobbing and moping about it. And that's the route that Norman has decided to go with his situation. But why exactly is the reason for why he was born into such a trap? Let's hear more of Norman and Marion's convo.
Sometimes, when she talks to me like that, I feel I'd like to go up there and curse her and leave her forever. Or at least a fire. But I know I can't. She had to raise me all by herself after my father died. A few years ago, Mother met this man, and he talked her into building this motel. He could have talked her into anything. And when he died too, it was just too great a shock for her.
So Mother has had a tough run of luck with her husband. Died, and the new man she met croaked too. And, oh, by the way, convinced her, according to Norman, talked his mother into building this motel. It's certainly understandable how she could have gone crazy in her later age. Norman tells her that after he died, she had nothing left, and Marion says the right moral thing, the uplifting, inspiring answer.
She had nothing left.
Except you.
And Norman just kind of shoots it down.
A son is a poor substitute for a lover.
Norman, don't sell yourself that short. And sons in general. Let me just mention the fucking huge-ass stuffed owl in the back, looking over them. Marion asks Norman, why don't you go away?
Why don't you go away?
As, not in that he has to, leave the room, but, why don't you take off? Basically, Marion is saying fuck Mother with that question, and Norman has a slick response.
To a private island like you?
No. Not like me.
Yeah, don't be like me. She's hinting that you don't want me to be your inspiration. Look at me, and the mess I am. And Norman explains his reasoning for why he can't leave. Let's hear more of what Norman thinks about Mother.
I couldn't do that. Who'd look after her? She'd be alone up there. The fire would go out. It'd be cold and damp like a grave. If you love someone, you don't do that to them even if you hate them. You understand? I don't hate her. I hate what she's become. I hate the illness.
Okay, so Norman is trapped because his mother has what sounds like dementia, and he is trapped to take care of her. Noble cause, no question, and Marion starts to suggest, but doesn't let it out.
Wouldn't it be better if you put her someplace?
Norman interrupts her, and the tone and demeanor of him completely changes, and he gets steely-eyed and starts taking a firm and decisive, the sweet old jolly gee whiz guy is no longer in the conversation, and he just lets her know that what she just suggested ain't okay with him.
You mean an institution? A madhouse? People always call a madhouse someplace, don't they? put her in someplace.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean it to sound uncaring.
What do you know about caring?
Marion says she's sorry and meant well, and also says that it seems as though Mother is hurting him, and Norman doesn't seem too accepting of her apology.
I meant well.
People always mean well. They cluck their thick tongues and shake their heads and suggest oh so very delicately.
Norman says he suggested to himself, though, of admitting her to the crazy house facility, but says that she needs him. And says she's not a raving lunatic and a maniac, but she just rather goes a little mad sometimes, which, I mean, all of us have had not well days. You sometimes get a hair up your ass, you're not in a good mood, you can maybe sound a little crazy sometimes, sure. Seems like he's trying to normalize unnecessary crazy outbursts to me, though. Marion says she's going to bed and that she has to drive back to Phoenix tomorrow. She happened to step into a trap, and so she wants to go back and make things right. So Marion has a change of heart. Good for her. Norman wants her to stay and chat, but Marion tells him she has to leave very early, and Norman tells her he'll bring breakfast and asks her what time. And Marion says at dawn. Norman says, "All right, miss," and gives her a pause, wanting her to tell him her last name. And she gives him her real last name, Crane, and Marion leaves to go to her room. Norman right away checks the sign-in book and sees that she's under a different city and last name, so he knows she's lying now. He then goes back into his stuffed bird-infested freak show room and takes down a painting, and you could see a hole in the wall. And we know it's not for bird watching. Norman looks in, and he is your classic peeping Tom Psycho. He doesn't gaze for too often, just long enough to see her in her black bra and put her robe on before she walks off to the side. Norman puts the painting back on the wall and steps back with this very serious look on his face, and walks out of the office and looks up at the house. He enters and gets to the stairs and walks to a step and then slumps down and makes his way to the kitchen. A very depressed looking Norman Bates right there. Marion is doing the math on paper of the money she took and spent and what she will still owe, but she winds up ripping it up and flushes it down the toilet. And oh, by the way, apparently this was the first movie that features a toilet. Marion steps in the shower and turns on the water, and she looks very satisfied. One could say that's an O-face right there. So satisfied. Keep in mind, in 1960, when this movie was made, women in showers making sexual faces like that was something that moviegoers never had seen, and it was a groundbreaking scene already up until this point. Between the woman O-face and the toilet's very first ever movie appearance, then the truly horrifying, everyone's worst fear moment. You naked in the shower, and somebody comes to the bathroom, and you don't know. The shadowy figure slowly makes its way over, and you could probably guess the rest. Mother darts out of the bathroom, and Marion slowly slides down on the bathroom wall. And as she slowly loses life, she rips down the shower curtain. We see her blood going down the drain. And then the camera slowly pans away from her lifeless eyes open, and it's a disturbing mindfuck of a scene because you are quite literally looking into her lifeless eyes. Because you truly feel like you're with her in that bathroom while the shower is still running, and to me this shot and frame is eerily reminiscent, her looking like that, to the stuffed birds that Norman has in the room. Marion, however, does not get stuffed like them, though. The camera then pans to the newspaper that's full of the $39,300 that's in there, and you're wondering what's going to happen with that now. We get to look out the window and hear Norman frantic.
Mother, oh God, Mother, blood, blood.
He runs down to the motel and discovers Marion on the floor, and he locks the window and starts looking around and thinking about what he's going to do now with this situation. He walks in with a mop and a bucket, and he intends to do some housekeeping service. And this to me is the end of Marion completely, the shower being turned off. And we see her lifeless arm in the frame with blood on the floor. Movies up until this point were all pretty much straight and narrow, and didn't show imagery such as this, a lifeless woman with blood on the floor being dragged out of a bathroom. This is a pretty monumental moment in cinema history. It must have been mental pandemonium for 1960s folk. Norman drags her out of the bathroom and looks at his hands, and he sees blood all over them, and he's disturbed by this and washes his hands. He mops the tub and the floor, and you see Marion's slippers on the floor, Hitchcock reminding us of her and being able to have a piece of her in the room, figuratively, still present while we see Norman's shoe and leg. Norman then heads out to Marion's car and backs it up so the trunk is facing the door to the room, and pops the trunk open so you could probably guess what's coming next. Norman folds the shower curtain over Marion and picks her body up and puts her in the trunk. He gathers up all her belongings and gets them together and puts them in the trunk. So he's not looking to rifle through her shit and see what she was all about. He's just like, let me just throw all of her shit in here with her. Norman re-enters to see if he missed anything, and he sees the newspaper, grabs it and tosses it in the trunk with Marion's body and her suitcase, and gets in the car and starts to drive off. Now you're practically falling out of your seat, wondering what's he going to do, and is he going to find out there's 39 grand in that newspaper? Norman pulls up to this swampy marsh and lets the car slide in, and helps it along with a push and watches it slowly sink until it stops. And he's quick looking around like, shit, am I going to have to get in there and try to help force this thing down? Or is it not going to fit? It's certainly a dilemma here, but it continues to finally sink, and you see him with this grin and smile, with satisfaction that the process of discarding the body and the vehicle is now complete. And this sadly eliminates any trace of Marion now, with the burying of her now in the swamp and the car, under all that water gunk analogy. This woman entering through this door is Marion's sister Lila, and she's looking for Sam. And he asks if anything's wrong, and she says she has not heard from Marion at all. And she gets very emotional with him, and thinks he might be hiding where she is or what's going on. And this guy comes in, a detective who goes by the name Arbogast. And Sam asks him, what's your interest in this? And the detective says $40,000. And Lila informs Sam that there was money she was supposed to deposit but didn't. Then we see highlights of Arbogast talking to different hotels, and what happens next leads him to pulling up to the Bates Motel with Norman sitting outside. And they exchange in small talk about the motel, and Arbogast says he wants to ask him a few questions. Gives him the scoop of that he's looking for a missing woman, and he shows him a picture of Marion and says, do you mind telling me if you've seen her? And Bates' reply definitely tips you off that he's nervous. He says nobody's been here for weeks, and he's very reluctant to look down at the photo. And Arbogast even tells him, like, look at the photo. He didn't even fucking look at it. He also wants to look at the sign-in book. And like a weirdo, Norman tilts his head all the way to the side, and it almost looks like that of a bird. Which would make sense that he behaves like one. Maybe the spirit of the dead stuffed ones in his freak show display room have made him believe he is one. Perhaps Norman rubs all the feathers all over himself in his spare time, and Arbogast puts the pieces together of her signing in under the fake name, and asks, was she in disguise by any chance? And Norman comes up with the best BS story, and it doesn't sound or go well at all.
Well, she arrived rather late one night, and she went straight to sleep and left early the next morning.
Well, how early?
Oh, very early.
Mm-hmm. Which morning was that?
The next morning.
Schwartz, you better fight your way past that stutter of yours and tell me about the pop-fly rule as it pertains to kickball.
Well, it's when...
Set of 10.
Did anyone meet her here?
No.
Did she arrive with anyone?
No.
Uh-huh. Did she make any phone calls or...
No.
Locally?
No, 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 no!
Did you spend the night with her?
No.
Did you have sex with her?
Well, then, how would you know that she didn't make any phone calls?
Norman says that she had to be up early to come back where she came from, and Arbogast asks, how did she pay? And Norman says cash. And the detective has one final question, and asks, after she left, she didn't come back? And Norman's response is the only good one he gave out of the whole conversation.
Oh, I see. How did she pay you? Cash, check?
Cash.
Cash, huh? Mm-hmm. And after she left, she didn't come back?
Well, why should she?
Detective Arbogast knows there's something not right here with this guy. Once they leave the office, Arbogast turns into a different direction than Norman, who is about to open up a cabin door, but looks over and sees Arbogast looking at the house, and can get a glimpse at the shadow of Mother. Arbogast wants to know, who's in the window? So after Norman stutters his way through more of this conversation with Arbogast, Norman, like Marion, a very shitty criminal, stumbling and fumbling all over his words.
She's an invalid. It's practically like living alone.
Arbogast really starts pressing him and applying the pressure on him. Are you hiding Marion?
Let's put it this way. She might have fooled me, but she didn't fool my mother.
Ah, yes. Nothing gets by Mommy. But Norman, trying to protect his mother by saying that, now has raised the antenna of Arbogast. That someone besides you saw and spoke to Marion, and he's not going to let that slide, and continues to march and plunge forward on the attack. Now Norman is standing there, pondering, knowing this is something that is going to be a problem. How do I solve this? Arbogast pulls away, and you see the freak that Norman Bates is, with this grin and smiling. So we know at this point what a demented freak he really is. Arbogast pulls over to call on a payphone, and gets in touch with Sam, and asks for Lila, and tells her that Marion was at the Bates Motel, and lets her know it was by the old highway, and informs her of what Norman told him about her, and tells her he's going to try to pick up the pieces and go off of what he's been told by Norman. He lets her know he was not satisfied with the visit at the motel and talking to Bates. There's something not right here. Arbogast is well inclined to be thinking that. Because he didn't get to speak with his mother, and he has a hunch that she talked to Marion. Arbogast says he's going to be back in an hour, and that he's going back to the motel. And he also lets her know he thinks Sam wasn't aware of Marion's whereabouts during this whole time she's been missing. And he's correct. Sam has nothing to do with Marion's disappearing. Norman's walking outside the motel and sees Arbogast pull up and quickly walks out of sight. Arbogast walks in the office and calls out Bates' name and doesn't find him there and looks at his interior decorating skills, which are nothing to be desired, and he finds a safe that's not completely closed. So Arbogast is now definitely thinking he has this 39 grand. Because why else would his safe be propped open? He's got probable cause now. All my years of watching Law & Order, I really feel like a true detective when saying that. He's for sure thinking he or his mother have done something to Marion. He takes it upon himself to walk up to the house. He opens the door and walks in and looks upstairs and figures that's where Norman's mother is and starts to head up. A door slowly starts to crack open, and you can see a shadow right behind it. And shadows, up until this point, have not been good. And they're not good this time either. Those 1960s special effects were truly something. But I will say, they do feel good enough to where you feel like you are falling back with him. Safe to say, with the knife plunging in and out and the moaning, that Arbogast is dead. Mother was very motivated to get down those stairs to him. Lila and Sam are together in his hardware store, and she gets worried about Arbogast not being back yet. It seems everybody who goes to this Bates Motel, they go missing. Sam wants to sit tight, but Lila asks how far is the highway, and Sam isn't too high on that idea, and he has a pretty good reason.
Stay here.
Why can't I go with you?
I don't know. One of us has to be here in case he's on the way.
Lila tells Sam that she's going, and he has a very insulting response and gives her some orders on top of that.
Stay here.
Sam gets to the motel and starts yelling for Arbogast, and Norman hears him, and you see that terrifying look of a maniac. And oh, by the way, he's chilling by the swamp. Maybe he stuffed Arbogast in his trunk and let his car slide down there with him. But Marion's car had some trouble sinking in, so Norman is definitely running out of room to put all these dead people in the swamp with their vehicles. Gotta calm down Mother, she's on a killing spree. Sam comes back to his store and finds out Arbogast didn't come back to the central location, and says he didn't find Bates, and says he saw a sick old lady, and says that she was unwilling or unable to answer the door. And Sam tries to justify the detective being missing, still by saying maybe he got a lead and he just went right on, but Lila replies by saying, without calling? And she makes a good point of how he called when he was just dissatisfied with the conversation he had with Norman at the motel. So it would be very unusual and out of character for him to not call if he had such a hot lead. But maybe this was just so sizzling he had to just go for it. Sam agrees it doesn't seem right that he would have called and tells her, let's go see Al Chambers, the deputy sheriff. And any man that wears a robe you know is honorable. And Sam gives him the breakdown of how her sister has gone missing and says the private detective is searching for her, traced her to the Bates Motel, and now he's missing. And says Arbogast called saying he was going to question Mrs. Bates, and Chambers' wife thinks that Norman found a wife. No, not a wife, Norman's mother, and they haven't seen or heard from him since. He's got mommy issues and does not want to leave her. Chambers wants to know how long has she been missing. That's right, why was Marion scurrying off?
Left Phoenix under her own steam?
Yes.
She's not missing so much as she's run away.
That's right.
From what?
She stole some money.
A lot.
$40,000.
Sam tells Chambers that everyone involved thought that if they could get her to give the money back, they would not have to involve the police. hence why the private detective came into play. But I think Mr. Lowry and Mr. Cassidy perhaps are flaky, sketchy individuals themselves, might be another reason to not wanting to involve law enforcement. So Chambers asks, what did he tell you when he called? And sounds standard what Lila tells him, that she was there for one night and she left, but Chambers wants to know, did she leave with the $40,000? And Lila tells him that he didn't say anything about the money. But Lila starts to get all worked up. And Chambers says, what do you want me to do? Lila apologizes for being over-anxious and says she thinks something is wrong. And Chambers says he thinks there is too. I mean, how could you not at this point? And he thinks the detective got a hot lead from Bates and took off. This whole hot lead thing is gaining some traction. Chambers' wife suggests calling the Bates Motel and getting a hold of Norman and asking him what happened. Chambers' response is fantastic.
Why don't you call Norman and let him say just what happened?
At this hour?
Hey! Do you have any idea what time it is?
Sam lets him know that Bates wasn't there when he showed up, and that there might be a good chance that if Bates is back, he isn't in bed yet. Al hits him with some knowledge.
He wasn't out when you were there. He just wasn't answering the door in the dead of night like some people do. This fellow lives like a hermit. You must remember that bad business out there about 10 years ago.
Please, call.
Norman picks up and Al tells him that they have worries over here, and the phone call goes as you'd expect. Marion wants to know, why didn't he come back? Did he speak to the mother? There's an aura of vagueness and people missing that's rightfully concerning for her, that anyone that goes to this motel all of a sudden goes missing and you can't find them. And Chambers drops a bombshell to Lila about Bates' mother.
Your detective told you he couldn't come right back because he was going to question Norman Bates' mother, right?
Yes.
Norman Bates' mother has been dead and buried in Green Lawn Cemetery for the past 10 years.
That's right, Bates' mother is dead. And to confirm this, Chambers' wife even says she helped pick out the dress the woman was buried in.
I helped Norman pick out the dress she was buried in. Periwinkle blue.
And she sounds like a lovely woman, too, with how she died.
Ain't only local history, Sam. It's the only case of murder and suicide on Fairvale ledgers. Mrs. Bates poisoned this guy she was involved with when she found out he was married. Then took a helping to the same stuff herself.
You had to kill him.
Strychnine. Ugly way to die.
She's A1 in the craft of murder-suicide. No wonder this guy is utterly and emotionally disturbed and fucked. Sam tells Chambers, so that old woman I saw in the window wasn't Bates' mother? And Chambers asked him, are you sure? It's a rational question. Maybe Sam is into doing hardcore drugs. He said he pounded on the door and he was just ignored. And Lila said the same kind of thing happened to Arbogast when he went to speak with her, and that Bates would not allow him to speak to his mother. Chambers' reply is rather chilling and spine-tingling, I'd say.
And the young man wouldn't let him see her because she was too ill.
Well, if the woman up there is Mrs. Bates, who's that woman buried out in Green Lawn Cemetery?
Bates hangs up the phone and goes up to the house and up the stairs to his mother. And they have an exchange.
Bring something up.
I am sorry, boy, but you do manage to look ludicrous when you give me orders.
Please, Mother.
I will not hide in the fruit cellar. I'm staying right here. This is my room and no one will drag me out of it.
They'll come now, Mother. He came after the girl and now someone will come after him.
I told you to get out, boy.
I'll carry you, Mother.
Norman, what do you think you're doing? Don't you touch me, don't! Norman! Put me down. Put me down. I can walk on my own.
Sam and Lila greet Chambers and his wife after they get out of church, and Al says he went to the motel and didn't find anything, and said Norman told him the same thing that your detective told you, and that he's alone and there's no woman there either, he says. He suggests they report a missing person and a theft, and that will involve the police fully on the matter. Lila says that she's not going to be satisfied until she gets to the Bates Motel. And she's got a real love for her sister, and big figurative balls for—
Can I ask you something?
Yeah, of course.
Do girls not have balls?
Girls do not have balls, no.
for doing so, because the people that are going to this motel are never seen again. As they make their way to the motel, Lila comes up with the idea that we're going to say that we're husband and wife, and we're going to search every inch of the facility. They pull up to the motel, and Bates, looking out the window, isn't too thrilled to see them. Lila tells Sam that she saw somebody in the window and the curtain moved. Bates comes down from the house, and Sam tells Norman that they're traveling to San Francisco, but they don't like the look of the sky, and think a bad day is coming. Obviously, Sam is a self-proclaimed weatherman now. Norman begrudgingly says okay. Bates says he'll take them to cabin 10, and Sam quickly tells him, shouldn't we sign in first? And Bates thinks it's not necessary. But Sam replies by saying this is a business trip and his boss is paying for it, and says he wants receipts, and firmly says he should sign in to get one. And Sam plays this stern mindfuck game with Bates.
I'll get your bags. Haven't any.
I'll show you the room then.
First time I've ever seen it happen. You check in any other place in this country without bags and you have to pay in advance.
Norman tells Sam that he'll show him to their cabin, and Sam wants no parts of that and says they'll find it. And I wish more people were like this. You have eyes. You could walk. You could find it your damn self. Norman is watching them walk off, and you can tell from his expression that he knows these folks are going to be a problem, and that they're here because of Marion and Arbogast somehow. When they get in the room, Lila tells Sam that they must get into the cabin that Marion was in and search, regardless of what they may find. And she's certain that Bates killed Marion and that it was motivated by the money she had on her. And says perhaps it's because the motel is useless and wants to upgrade, and she's right. I mean, it is pretty bare looking there, so that's a pretty good assumption by her. Sam tells Marion they'll start with cabin 1 to search. Sam goes into the office area and looks and calls for Bates, but no answer. So Marion and him go back into cabin 1. You think Bates would have that cabin locked with the whole murder taking place and everything, but no. So they search the room. Sam notices that there's no shower curtain, and also Lila finds in the toilet the ripped up sheet of paper that Marion was doing the math on earlier of how much money she owed after the car she purchased. And Marion had to be really bad at math because $40,000 minus $700 is not difficult. And that's coming from somebody who's horrible at math. To Lila, this is a revelation that she was in this cabin, and it's certainly a big clue and strong evidence. Lila believes that this solidifies that he found out about the money, and Sam, I'm not so sure if he's serious or not with this response.
Doesn't that prove that he found out about the money?
Do we simply ask him where he's hidden it?
No.
Lila decides to zero in on what Norman's mommy might know and wants to get to talk to her. Sam grabs Marion and says, you can't go up there because of Bates. Sam, come on. It's 2 against 1, and plus you want to find out where your lover is, don't you? He's not determined to the full extent. Maybe he's already moved on from Marion. Lila wants to play the gab and distract game with him. One of us talk to him, and the other finds his mommy and basically interrogates the old hag. Sam says he doesn't feel comfortable with Lila being in the house, and she assures him that she can handle an old sick bitch like Mrs. Bates.
I don't like you going to that house alone.
I can handle a sick old woman.
And Sam settles on the plan of him distracting Norman and allowing Marion to find Mommy. And Sam must be expecting a showdown of life and death proportions.
Get anything out of the mother? Can you find your way back to town?
Yes, of course.
If you do get anything, don't stop to tell me.
So they leave the room, and Sam walks in front of the office door, and Norman must have been waiting on him. And he and Sam have a close-knit talk, shall we say?
You satisfied with your cabin?
That's fine.
Lila goes in pursuit. She enters the home, and Sam is asking a lot of questions to Norman.
I've been doing all the talking so far, haven't I? I thought it was the people who were alone most of the time who did all the talking when they got the chance. Here you are doing all the listening. You're alone here, aren't you? You drive me crazy.
I think that would be a rather extreme reaction, don't you?
Just an expression. What I meant was, I'd do just about anything to get away. Wouldn't you?
No.
Norman thinks that's a bit much and rather extreme, and Sam is going to try to get him to crack and confess something, and it's rather obvious in his questions, and Norman's probably thinking, this guy does not love his mother like I do. Lila gets to the upstairs, knocks on the door, and calls out for Mrs. Bates. And she opens the door, and there's no mother. The room is empty. It's a very high-end room, though, and there's a sink right by the door. Lila goes snooping around and comes across this sculpture that has folding hands, and the camera zooms in and scares herself by thinking there's someone in the room with her, but no, it's just her in the mirror. Marion also observes from the indentations and grooves in the sheets and the mattress that somebody has been laying there. Meanwhile, Sam continues to hammer away at Norman. He's getting rather snippy with all this questioning.
A chance to get out from under, you'd unload this place.
This place? This place happens to be my only world. I grew up in that house up there. I had a very happy childhood. My mother and I were more than happy.
Lila stumbles into Norman's childhood, and let's just say it doesn't have a warm, cozy feel to it.
Cozy if you're Hannibal Lecter.
I mean, how many little kids are big into listening to Beethoven? She also notices that the mattresses and sheets are not done, which indicates to her that somebody is still sleeping in here. Now, Sam has cracked the dam with Norman because you can see Norman practically on the verge of tears now at this point. And he's falling apart because he knows him and Lila are onto him.
You look frightened. Have I been saying something frightening?
I don't know what you've been saying.
I've been talking about your mother, about your motel. How are you going to do it?
Do what?
Buy a new one? In a new town where you won't have to hide your mother?
Why don't you just get in your car and drive away from here, okay?
Where will you get the money to do that, Bates? Or do you already have it, socked away?
Shut up!
A lot of it. $40,000. I bet your mother knows where the money is, and what you did to get it. I think she'll tell us.
This is an interesting part because what Sam just told Norman, he has no idea about the $40,000 because when he was packing up Marion's belongings, he didn't discover the money. So he's oblivious to this claim. But that's not crossing his radar. It's the fact that they want to interrogate Mother. And Norman freaks out that Lila might be discovering her soon.
Where's that girl you came here with? Where is she?
You don't see panic like this often, unless it's Courage the Cowardly Dog. Marion heads down the stairs and Norman and Sam are in a tussle. Sam is trying to hold him at bay, but Norman won't be denied and clocks him over the head with a vase and knocks him out. Norman comes running up to the house and Marion sees him through the window in the door and hides underneath the staircase and decides to make her way to the cellar where she sees a doorway. She opens up a door and sees a woman in a chair. I'll let this footage roll.
Mrs. Bates.
This sick bastard, Norman Bates, has been playing make-believe with Mommy's corpse. Now you truly know why this movie is called Psycho. Lila looks back because she hears footsteps, and it's Norman dressed up in his mother's clothes, wielding a knife. This movie just keeps on getting more frightening and more frightening. Sam comes in to save Lila from winding up like her sister in Arbogast. Sam gets the knife away from him, and Norman's wig falls off, and Mother's corpse is shown one last time. Then the county courthouse appears. A psychiatrist walks in and gives the breakdown of what's really happening with Norman. It's quite a scene.
Did he talk to you? No. I got the whole story, but not from Norman. I got it from his mother.
Norman has multiple personalities. Himself, with obviously is a shell of what he was at one point, and his abrasive mother's persona.
Norman Bates no longer exists.
He did.
He only half existed to begin with, and now the other half has taken over. Probably for old time.
The psychiatrist apologizes to Lila for her loss and tells him if you look in the swamp, and he cuts himself off at the end to avoid being too gruesome, because if he's finishing that sentence, he's like, yeah, look in the swamp, you'll find your dead sister there. That just seems rather cruel, so he spares them saying that part. But they get the idea. He asks detectives there about if there had been any unsolved missing persons cases. This is insinuating that this hasn't been just a one-time thing. And the psychiatrist goes further into what transpired.
That is, from the mother half of Norman's mind. You have to go back 10 years, to the time when Norman murdered his mother and her lover.
Remember this moment earlier when Norman told Marion that no son is a substitute for a lover? Yeah, he had enough of her.
Now, he was already dangerously disturbed.
I'm ready to go in, Coach. Just give me a chance.
Had been ever since his father died. His mother was a clinging, demanding woman.
I missed you! Didn't you miss me? Where did you go? The boys' room? Don't lie to me. Who's in there? What's her name? Tell me I'm pretty!
And for years, the two of them lived as if there was no one else in the world. Then, she met a man. And it seemed to Norman that she threw him over for this man. Now, that pushed him over the line, and he killed them both.
But what's so ironic is that his mom was so demanding and clingy, you think he'd be happy for his mother. That she found a man to maybe get her to tone down a bit. But he felt slighted and so hurt, so Mommy had to go along with the sorry bastard that decided he wanted Mrs. Bates. That's why Marion had to die, because Norman felt something going down south below in his trousers. Norman took his mom's already dead shitty personality, from what at least he depicted her as, sprinkled on himself her jealousy to make one hell of a psycho. Sam asks the psychiatrist,
Why was he dressed like that?
Sam, this is role-playing here. In order to get the full effect, you need the proper attire. The psychiatrist says that he did that to keep the illusion of his mother still actually being alive.
He was simply doing everything possible to keep alive the illusion of his mother being alive. And when reality came too close, when danger or desire threatened that illusion.
The psychiatrist ends his speech to them by saying that the mother personality has completely hijacked Norman's mind, and he thinks that he is her now. So this whole movie, we are witnessing the last remaining remnants of Norman Bates. Al asks about the $40,000 and tells him that the money is in the swamp since this was a crime of passion. But let's be honest, I think if he knew about the $40,000 being there, he would have taken that. He could have gotten a lot more wigs and attire to pretend to be Mother. An officer walks in and says he feels a chill, that being Norman, and asks if he could bring him a blanket. And the deputies and psych counselors sign off on it, and then we hear a thank you in the voice of Mother. Yeah, he's got Mother's voice down pat. And the camera slowly zooms in on Norman, and we hear Mother's voice in what is a complete takeover of him, and it's incredible and frightening all at once.
But I couldn't allow them to believe that I would commit murder. They'll put him away now, as I should have, years ago. He was always bad.
This is now depicting what Mother's projected punishment would have been as a result of this.
And in the end, he intended to tell them I killed those girls.
Notice girls is plural, which is an omission that multiple have died because of this guy. This, in a way, is now Mother defending and sticking up for herself, as Norman thinks that she would have done.
And that man, as if I could do anything except just sit and stare, like one of his stuffed birds.
You stuffed her like a Thanksgiving turkey!
Oh, they know I can't even move a finger.
Finger bang! Bang, bang! Finger bang, bang! Bang, bang, bang!
And I won't. I'll just sit here and be quiet, just in case they do suspect me.
Norman, in a way, by killing people as Mother, tried to smear her character. You think all along, Mother is the crazy one and the psycho. But in actuality, it's Norman. In the end, the aura and mystique of Mother wins and takes him over. In a way, it's kind of like Mother's revenge. Norman killed her, and now Mother has completely taken over his vessel, his body, his mind.
They're probably watching me. Well, let them. Let them see what kind of a person I am. I'm not even going to swat that fly. I hope they are watching. They'll see. They'll see, and they'll know, and they'll say.
This is basically the Mother persona being like,
look at me, sure. Look at me, sure. I'm the captain now.
Why, she wouldn't even harm a fly.
In a great transition, you see closely before the screen fully goes to the car, being dragged out of the swamp. You're able to see very quickly and briefly Norman's face being merged with Mother's corpse's face. But this is foreshadowing how Norman, and the last remnants of him anyway, was going to try to blame the Mother half of his personality, and to try to get the Norman version of himself off the hook by pleading insanity and by carrying out the actions of what his mother would have done. This whole movie is perfect in my eyes. From top to bottom, there's no need for a drum roll. It's an A. Woolly seal of approval. The Rotten Tomatoes score audience with a 95, critics with a 96%. It's spot on, and I give a thumbs up to both of them. In regards to this film, it's an all-time classic, and this is certainly my favorite Alfred Hitchcock movie. The suspense, the acting, the imagery, and the foreshadowing. This film is at the top of not just the horror movie watching genre. This movie, when it comes to themes, imagery, foreshadowing, directing, acting, it's top tier. That's all, folks, my review of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. If you enjoyed this review, please hit that like and subscribe button down below, as well as that notification bell, so you are notified about the next Ryan Woolley movie review. I am Ryan Woolley, signing off, humbly saying thank you, and hasta la vista, baby.